We said hello. I'll take one. Or better, I'll just take a picture of one of yours. How about that? Mm-hmm. Got it, thank you. One less piece of paper. Otolaro? All right.
Is that okay with you?
All right, but you still are going to do our welcome, correct?
I'm just going to do it from up there for aesthetics.
No, ma'am, I don't have that, but you do want to speak? Oh, well, maybe. Let's see. She wants to be a speaker. Oh. No, I'm listening to you. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. I've got one. But on each of the other tables would be great.
millennium and teens is social media. I am in my friends and I call it the with and without generation. We grew up without social media and we're growing up with social media. Any media, people portraying lives in ways that they don't have the means, or people thinking they have to live up to certain expectations. I know people who feel like they have to look like $1 million every day they step out of the house, and they don't work, or they work a minimum wage job. And just trying to keep up with the stigma of showing I'm living my best life on social media is driving people crazy.
I think if you just let it all out, I think it'll be better results. Even if just going to see a therapist once a week, just getting it out because they're not a biased perspective compared to telling somebody you do know. So I would just say, trying out therapy, even if you have to write your feelings down, just to get it out your system.
I feel like the rise in suicides for my generation is because we probably just don't feel heard a lot of times, or don't feel like we have someone to talk to that could relate to us. Just because we grew up in a time where the world really changed, we had to deal with like a lot of change in the world, like the pandemic, COVID, canceling of graduations. We probably just had to deal with a lot of stuff on our own that our parents weren't so easily to understand.
Situation.
Why?
Because a lot of people look down on other people who are going through mental health issues because they simply don't believe it's a serious problem.
It's a good question. I honestly don't know. I wouldn't know what to do.
I don't know who to refer a person who is going to commit suicide to.
If someone called me and said they were going to commit suicide, I probably wouldn't know what to do, because you never know what they're going to do in that moment.
If a friend called me and they were wanting to commit suicide, I now know that there are resources that are available to them. Growing up in the Black community, the first response is, always to tell someone, you don't mean that, or we're just going to pray. Prayer is not always the only answer.
I was about 5 years old when I went through child sexual abuse. And I had to keep this secret because I was told by my abuser not to tell this secret. It continued and continued. And when I go to my dad's house and then she said yes, I said, "Él me tocó." Those were the 3 words that I said to her in Spanish, and in English they mean "he touched me." Those were the only 3 words that I got out because my mom, she got rightfully upset. She got very irate, and she started to make phone calls and call the whole family. I felt like I let my whole family down because back in those days, it was a big deal. You do not tell your family's secrets. You do not tell other people what happens in this house, stays in this house. We live by that because that's the way we were programmed. That's the way we were brought up. Back then, I did not realize that keeping such a secret inside would be detrimental and really cause me to battle with so much depression and feel isolated and feel alone. Around age 13, I attempted suicide. I was hoping to end the pain and to get away from everybody that's hurt me, especially that experience with sexual abuse. A lot of times people think that because you went through it so many years ago that you're over it today, but these are things that keep coming up in your life if they're not appropriately addressed. My name is Dr. Nancy B. Brown Willis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to thank everyone for your patience in coming out. As you see, this is an extremely important conversation, and so I wanted to make sure that those at home captured everything that we're saying. So I wanted to hold off for a quick second before we did the introductions, but I think we're going to be queued up and ready now. We're streaming on all City of Atlanta social media, and I believe the City of Atlanta's website, I believe. So I wanted to make sure all of this information is captured. Also, guys, what I want to do, the video that was played, I want to go ahead and rerun that as we are departing when we wrap up today, so it will be captured live as well. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, up there. Awesome. Shamir, just give me a thumbs up when we're ready. Okay. So we're going to pick up where you're going to do the introductions, and we'll run the video at the very end when we're all departing.
Would you like for me to introduce you to bring a word of welcome, or was that? Because that's the first thing on my list.
Okay, I forgot about it. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Candace Presley, and happy to join Atlanta City Council member Keisha Waits for the Atlanta Mental Health Symposium, an opportunity to discuss a very critical and important issue facing everyone in our community. Before we introduce you all to the members of our panel and hope to hear from members of the audience here and also online, we wanted to begin with a word of welcome and a statement of purpose from our City Council host. City Council member Keisha Waits.
Ms. Presley, thank you so much, and thank you for agreeing to give so graciously of your time this afternoon. As each of you know, this is an extremely important conversation that we are dealing with, and so for that reason, I'm not going to delay the process and want to get right into the dialogue this afternoon. Nonetheless, thank you again to each of our panelists, and they will be introduced by our moderator, and I'll give some remarks a little bit later. Thank you so much.
And thank you again. Let us begin by introducing each member of our panel today. And as each panel member is introduced, we're going to ask that person to share take a couple of minutes to make an introductory statement on what your assessment is on the mental illness crisis, not only in this community, but also nationwide. I know many people watch the news each and every day, and sadly, there's often a story that involves violence and then also involves someone who is battling some sort of mental illness disorder. So our first panelist I'd like to introduce is Dr. Tatiana Villarreal Otolaro. Did I pronounce that correctly? Yay me. She is an assistant professor at Kennesaw State University in the Department of Social Work and Human Resources. Dr. Villarreal Otolaro. Okay. We have to turn your microphone on. I think there's a button there.
Yes. I stated I'm also a volunteer for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for the Georgia chapter, which I'm here humbled and honored to represent. So on a personal note, I am an immigrant. I came to Georgia as an immigrant, as a young Latina adolescent, and I saw many of my Latina friends attempt suicide, and it was something no one talked about. But now we have the data. So now the data is showing that suicide rates have been increasing for the last decades. And there's a lot to do with that. It's very complex. It has to do with multiple systems. So you have family, you have community, you have larger social media. So I don't want to simplify it into one thing. It needs to be a holistic approach because it's a holistic, it's a multifaceted problem.
Thank you. And next we have Dr. Vanetta Dodson, who is a Ptsd psychologist and author from Georgia State University. She is a professor of psychology and gerontology at GSU, senior project scientist at NASA, and founder and president of CerebroFit Integrated Brain Health. And as you introduce yourself and your thoughts, tell us also a little bit about the organization that you lead. Dr. Dodson.
Yes, thank you so much for having me here. This is such an important topic, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of it. My training is as a neuropsychologist, which means I really focus on brain-behavior relationships. So my perspective really is one of trying to integrate what we know about biological contributors to mental illness and mental health, both sides of the spectrum, and how that interacts with our environment, with our personalities, with our experiences. And, you know, as we were just hearing, it's a very complicated sort of cause and a complicated solution. And one of the approaches that I take and that my company CerebraFit takes is trying to improve brain health, which really is mental health, because ultimately mental health is tied to how our brain is functioning, different biological contributors. So I'm sure we'll get into this a bit later, but there are behavioral things we can do that really do improve the health of our brain, which really is improving the health of our mind. So I see it as just, again, a holistic approach that includes that biological aspect.
And what happens at the CerebraFit Integrated Brain Health?
We offer a variety of services to, in an integrated way to help people improve their brain health and mental health. So rather than just having one type of service, people have the opportunity to have psychotherapy, to get cognitive assessments, to have an exercise program that's developed and led by our trainer, nutrition. So taking a multifaceted approach and being able to have it one stop for brain health, where someone can come to one place and be able to get all the things they need to be able to promote their brain and their mental health.
Also on our panel today is Dr. Keisha Izzard. I knew I was going to step on that, although I've been practicing since I got here.
That is all right. It's Keisha.
And you are a licensed professional counselor with close to 20 years of experience in mental health counseling with diverse populations. You have a number of letters that trail your name, including LPC, ACS, NCC, and founder and CEO of Shekinah Counseling, NAMI, Georgia, and you're also on the NAMI, Georgia Board of Directors. So please share.
Thank you so much, Ms. Priestley, for that beautiful introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. And again, I am Dr. Keisha Izzard. I am a licensed professional counselor. For close to 20 years, I've been serving in the space of mental health. So this is my wheelhouse, and I'm so excited to be here and to share with you all on today, because again, we are literally in a mental health crisis. I serve on the board of directors for the National Alliance for Mental Illness right here in Georgia, which is the largest grassroots association that focuses on mental health as well as on education, support, and advocacy. And so we are just excited to continue to move the needle forward as it relates to mental health awareness. We understand the value as it relates to decreasing and erasing the stigma around mental health, for we know that mental health has been misunderstood for so many years. And so when we talk about being in a mental health crisis, we want to bring awareness. We want to bring education. We want to make sure that individuals know that they have resources and that they have the support that they need, and that they no longer have to shy away or be hiding or just be in a space where they're alone as it relates to dealing with mental conditions or mental illness. Thank you again for having me today.
And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce to some and reintroduce to others a woman who speaks profoundly in a video that you all will have an opportunity to see if you are viewing this online at the end of today's symposium. But Ms. Brown, who shared a very personal story and is here with us in the council chambers this afternoon, if you would offer, for those who have not yet seen what you shared before, what you would like for us to know.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Nancy V. Brown Willis. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. What I shared with everyone was that I'm a child sexual abuse survivor. I'm also a survivor of suicide, and unfortunately, in 2020, I lost my sister to suicide. So this is a cause that's very near and dear to my heart. My purpose really is to help stop suicide, or help to let people know that they're not alone. You know, when you're dealing with depression, you definitely feel alone. You're embarrassed. There's a stigma surrounded to mental illness, depression, anxiety, all of that. So I just want to encourage those that are feeling lonely, that are feeling sad, to reach out for help because you're not alone. And definitely when someone does reach out for help, don't make them feel ashamed. Encourage them to get the right help. Maybe we can, us talking about it, the more we talk about it, the more we can get the right resources and the right information so that when someone comes to us, we know how to help them. Thank you.
And thank you for being open and vulnerable and sharing. There are three major categories or issues that we want to tackle during the time that we have with everybody today. We are seeking, one, to define the problem and explain the differences between maintaining good mental health and mental illness. We want to talk about the challenges facing reaction and readiness when someone encounters someone who may be in crisis or facing trouble. And then before we go, we definitely want to talk about possible solutions. And I suspect that one we will continue to hear throughout our time together today is if someone asks you for help or says they are experiencing a crisis, take them seriously, do not judge, and help them to find the help that they need. Would that be a fair assessment for the members of our panel?
Absolutely.
Dr. Dodson, since you are someone who is a neuroscientist, can you differentiate for us and our viewers the differences between mental health and mental illness?
That's a really great question. You can really think of mental health and mental illness as being, I guess you could say, a spectrum. I think that sometimes we get into this kind of fallacy of making categories that either you're mentally ill or you're mentally healthy. And in reality, we can have gradations of how depressed we feel, how anxious we feel. We have, even if you do have something like major depression, there's different levels of severity. So it really is this spectrum of how healthy are you when it comes to your mental health versus what particular mental health conditions might you have. You can think of it kind of like physical health. When it comes to physical health, people don't say I'm healthy or I'm not. They will have, they might have pre-diabetes or they might have diabetes, but both things are still important. They might be starting to have a little bit of elevated blood pressure versus having severe elevated blood pressure. So in that way, you can think of mental health as the same way that you have this sort of spectrum or continuum of mental health going to mental illness, and that also can fall into different types of categories. It's not that you just have depression, anxiety, which is what we mostly talk about. There are different ways in which basically our body and our environment work against us to create different symptoms. So that continuum, I think, would be an important way of looking at it.
Dr. Izzard, could you discuss for everyone how mental illness may begin to show up in an individual?
Absolutely. Well, again, like I said, I am a licensed professional counselor in mental health. So I have been able to work with you all, just a variety of individuals with severe mental illness and mental health challenges. I've also been a special education teacher working with children with mental health challenges and disorders. And one of the key things that we've been trained to identify and to notice when we're looking for signs and symptoms as it relates to mental illness, which we consider that an actual mental health disorder, is the lack of functioning. So anytime an individual gets to a place and they're unable to function, let's say in their daily routines, whether that's keeping up their hygiene, brushing their teeth, clothing themselves, doing their hair, if they're struggling in other areas such as not able to eat or overeating, so that means either losing 10 pounds, gaining 10 pounds, things of that nature. If they're having difficulty concentrating and they're kind of all over the place or very irritable, very moody, these are some of the things that we look for so that we can identify if whether or not more is going on with that person. Now, we also get a little help from what we call the Mental Health Bible, which is the DSM-5. That is something we also utilize as it relates to criteria for signs and symptoms so that we can assess to the very best of our ability. But does that mean that we always get it right? No, we do not. We are human as well. Licensed counselors, therapists, we are human too. And it takes time to build a relationship with someone, to be able to see those patterns of behavior so that you can really understand more of what's going on with them. What I love about being a part of the National Alliance of Mental Illness is that we also take what we call a peer recovery look when it comes to individuals with mental illness. We teach them how to not hide in any way, meaning we teach them how to talk about their mental health challenges, talk about their symptoms. We have programs like peer-to-peer, NAMI in our own voice, NAMI connection support groups, so that people can become comfortable with talking about some of these symptoms that they're seeing and understanding that they're not the only ones. They're not alone. So while I also have this clinical background, I also understand that I have to learn from the peers, certified peer specialists we have out there now that are helping one another. So when it comes to mental illness or severe and persistent mental illness, we're looking for that functioning process and if whether or not this person is able to carry on with their day-to-day activities. That is how we are able to define if a person has a disorder. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
We want this to be a conversation, not just a dissemination of information to the audience. There is an opportunity for people who are in the audience and hopefully online to raise and to offer questions as we continue this conversation. But for the members of our panel, if somebody on the panel says something and you want to weigh in or you have a thought, just let me know or just jump right in and please let this be a free-flowing conversation. So, Dr. Villarreal, Otolaro, I wanted to ask you a two-part question. One, are people of color disproportionately impacted by mental illness? Is that fair to say that? Or is the care for people of color who suffer from mental illness, is that what the problem is?
I think unfortunately it's both, right? So especially, and where we're seeing it really the most and where it's the scariest, at least for me, is seeing it at our youth. So our youth of color. So specifically, we see that they have higher rates for suicidal, so thinking about killing themselves or attempting suicide than their peers. And there's the stigma that we've alluded to a little bit of talking about it. I don't want to say that because I'm scared that there may be negative repercussions for my family. I'm scared that I may be looked at differently and say they don't speak up. So kind of going to that. And then when they do speak up, which is only about 10%, so 10% of youth do choose to speak out, which takes a lot of bravery and say, you know, I'm not feeling the same. I'm not, there's something that's just not right now with me. Most of them, only about 3%, are connected to services. And that has a lot to do with sometimes language barriers, but also not knowing where to get the information. Where do we connect for services? Like, who do we go to? And hopefully, as we progress with the panel, we'll talk about some of the very specific places that we can go. I will say the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which I love, has a whole list of resources of where I can go. Who can I call? There are hotlines that we can call, and we'll talk more about that as we progress, that you can call and ask, I have a friend, and they're behaving differently. Maybe they're not showing up to work the same time they typically show up. I've noticed that they're not keeping up with their hygiene, as we mentioned. Where do I go? Who do I call? And what resources do I have? And a trained counselor will get on the phone with you and give you a list of resources and even walk you through how to have that conversation.
Dr. Brown-Rivers, you've shared that you lost a family member to suicide. You've shared that you attempted suicide. Talk to us about this so-called code, that what happens in this house stays in this house, and the shame that may be associated with having to keep things a secret. And how do we break that cycle?
So I'm originally from Costa Rica. Growing up there, and back in the days, like I said, we had that specific code, but a lot of people that I come across now, they also share that, that they have had that in their family, where what happens in this house stays in this house. So we have a lot that we can relate to. So when I was going through depression, I started feeling very numb. I was very disconnected. And a lot of the youth that I talked to, I also volunteer with NAMI and the National Federation for Suicide Prevention as well. And a lot of the youth that I talked to in the community who share that they've had these thoughts of committing or dying by suicide, they definitely feel ashamed, they feel embarrassed. They feel that people are gonna call them crazy, so they don't feel like sharing that, and they keep it private to themselves. And when you're feeling depressed, you feel numb, and there's a big disconnect, and that's like a space where negative thoughts start coming in your mind. I'm not worthy, I screwed up, I messed up, I'm not worthy, I shouldn't be here. It'll be easier if I just go away. And then you get tired of the pain, you know. For me, I went through sexual abuse at the age of 5, and I shared with my father. Okay, that was very traumatic for me. That was very traumatic. I went to counseling, I got help, but that's still something that you deal with outside of just in the doctor's office or the doctor meeting with you on the phone. This is something that's very real and is very difficult to get past and get through. So again, I just encourage people, if you see someone that's dealing with any type of separation, they're isolating themselves, you notice that they're giving away belongings, they're doing just things that are kind of off the chart, reach out and be supportive. I think right now we're also in a time where people are becoming more aware about their own mental health, and they're starting to notice things about themselves that maybe they didn't notice before, that they also are falling in those patterns and they're doing, especially coming out of COVID. A lot of people were isolated. Yes, sir? You want to say something?
Hang on a second, we're gonna get a microphone to you so that everyone can hear.
Celestia, have him come up here so we can capture it in the audience. Have him come up here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm not trying to interrupt though. No. But I mean, I've been there, and I was touched as a child too. So I identify for I can feel your pain. Now, I'm a prophet of God as well. But what y'all just explained is the Jezebel spirit and narcissism. And when we get into Jezebel's spirit, that produces suicide. And I had been to that point too. I tried to commit suicide too, but that's been years ago. So, I mean, like I was 25, so I'm 51. But what I'm saying though is that homelessness and mental health, I guess the question I'm asking is I'm walking past girls and men that feel that no one cares about them and they want to commit suicide in Atlanta, Fulton County, DeKalb County. Now, I'm not saying that's y'all fault, and I don't want to be misconstrued. I'm just saying that when you get to when you have that mindset, I'll say it like this, I'm dealing with people right now. You understand what I'm saying?
Let's clarify the question because we're on a strict time.
Okay, I'm saying the question is, my question and comment is that I'm dealing with people that want to commit suicide right now. And also that how should I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want to say the wrong thing to them.
Okay, there's a good question for us. Thank you very much, sir. So who on our panel wants to tackle that? When you encounter someone who is in crisis and asking for help, or you obviously to you needs help, what is the appropriate response?
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, please. I was gonna say, so one thing you kind of mentioned is that individual, when we're in crisis, we're in tunnel vision, right? So think about the time that you were in the most physical pain. If someone asked you to get from point A to point B, you would have no idea. You'd be like, I'm in so much pain, I cannot answer that. So we, as that person that they're confiding in, are gonna allow them to see. So we're gonna kind of give options, but very directly. So the first thing, you're gonna thank them. Thank you so much for sharing this. This is really difficult information to share, and I'm proud that you're saying this out loud. The second thing is let them know that there are resources. So we're gonna figure this out together, and I'm gonna connect you to some resources. let's call a crisis line. Let's call a crisis line. And right now, actually, if the individual has said, like, I want to kill myself, I tried to kill myself, within, a week or a day or so, you can call 988. They actually just rolled it out, 988. And in Georgia, the way 988 works is they get rolled out to the Georgia Crisis and Access Line, who will connect you with a trained counselor. And they will talk with you. They will ask you to pass the phone to the individual that's there. They will talk to the individual, and they will eval. They will assess that situation. Because what we have to remember in that moment is that we're not there to assess. We're not there to judge. We're honestly there to say thank you, to hold that space with that person and make that call for them. Because in that moment, they may not be able to. Or if you encounter someone that has hurt themselves in the moment, taking them to the ER. So going with them to the ER, if it's a safe situation for you. So keeping those in mind, thank them, praise them, connect them to resources, call 988. They will know exactly what to ask and how to eval, because it's not our job to do that. Our job is to be there.
Dr. Dodson, you nodded as if you wanted to weigh in as well.
Yes, I was just thinking, number one, I 100% agree with everything that you said, and one thing that I think is really important thread throughout what you said is that you're there with that person and they're not feeling alone, because part of that hopelessness that really feeds suicidal thoughts and actions is feeling like you're alone, you're not understood, or that you should feel shame. So when you're there and you're expressing appreciation and you're saying, we're gonna do this together, then it goes from that person being, I'm alone and I don't know what to do, to, okay, someone cares enough to take this time and they're not judging me. So that connection with other people is so important, and I can't stress that enough. So I kept nodding my head thinking, yes, you're hitting all the important points about just being with that person and making them not feel alone.
Dr. Keisha, homelessness is a major problem in this community. How do we as a community address the mental health challenges faced by people who are experiencing homelessness, as our guest also noted in his question?
Well, and that's something that we are constantly trying to work more on within the mental health field as mental health professionals. I even work closely with some of my elected officials within my county as it relates to homeless programs. But I think the key thing is understanding where that comes from. How do individuals get to a place to where they are homeless? So I think the understanding piece, the building the rapport piece, the connecting piece is critical. And then we can get to the place of understanding what are our services that are out there? What are our housing services? What are our resources that can connect them so that they can get the opportunity to have the shelter that they need? We know that majority of the individuals who are homeless, they do experience some form of mental illness or a substance use issue. So again, we understand that they have to be connected to resources, and we have to understand what the underlying causes are as it relates to an individual that is homeless. Have our homeless populations increased in Atlanta and even within our rural areas? Absolutely. I'm originally from Greensboro, North Carolina, and I was just home a couple of weeks ago and walking downtown, and I noticed that our homeless population had even increased there. We had individuals who were sleeping outside downtown, who were in the park, who were sleeping on benches in the park, and I said, oh, this is something we have got to continue to work harder on. So really, I truly believe is developing that understanding, connecting with that person again, as we've already talked about on the panel, identifying the current resources that we have, the ones that we don't have, making sure that we're working toward improving some of those. We know that our community service boards, they offer different residential type programs, substance use recovery programs, 28-day programs, but many of these programs, you all, they are struggling, okay, because they do not have enough room. There are limited beds. And so these are all things that we have to continue to work on, which I'm so grateful that we made history a couple of months ago in passing HB 1013, woo, the Mental Health Parity Act, but it's gonna take time. And we have to inform our elected officials, and thanks to our great commissioner that's right here that's having something related to mental health, so that we can start to talk to them about some of these resource challenges, some of the challenges at our current mental health facilities, so that we can get the funding that we need, so that we can get the housing that we need. Hopefully that helps.
Indeed it did, and it actually advanced our conversation into the next phase of this meeting today, and that is talking about some of the challenges associated with getting people who are experiencing mental illness or have mental health needs the help, the resources that they need. Whose responsibility is it, whether it's someone at home, in the schools? Is it the government's responsibility? You've already, Dr. Izzard, spoken of the nonprofit sector's efforts, but the need is great, is what I'm hearing, but the resources are few.
So I would say it's all of our responsibilities. This is a community effort. It is every individual, it's their family, it's their friends, it's the communities they live in, it's the government, it's at all levels. Because again, it's a multifaceted cause and a multifaceted solution. One thing that I think is really important is that we think of mental health in the same way that we think of physical health. Because when it comes to physical health, we have, for example, that anyone can go to the emergency room and get treatment. You know, we have this premium that we put on making sure that we have, you know, clean water or other things that we know can harm us physically. Well, what about things that harm us mentally? You know, what about the government doing more to try to remove some of the contributors to mental illness that we know are based on neighborhoods and based on crime and based on other things that could have a solution if the right resources were put into it. So I think having that lens of mental health and physical health should be on par. And so the same way that we do things to provide safety for people's physical bodies, we have to do the same thing when it comes to our minds.
Thank you very much. We do have a question and perhaps a comment from a stakeholder in the community. If you would just tell us your name and go ahead.
My name is Judea Arrington. We're just going to turn the mic on so that everyone that's listening and streaming live can hear you. Hello. My name is Judea Arrington, and my question was about what she was stating, Miss Keisha, about homelessness and everything. So I work with kids with behavioral disabilities for the state, and a lot of time it was through the fostering that these kids they was becoming a part of statistics because they had nobody to care for them. So the resources that were actually provided at that time were actually, it was basically like, it was iffy because they knew that they had nobody. They knew not just kids, but the homes, different homes, and the different organizations that actually foster these kids. They knew that they didn't have anyone. And for one of the places that I worked, I was actually fired because I couldn't take it. I could not deal with it because I have 5 kids myself that has autism. And so I put myself into these situations so that I know if I can help my kids, I can help someone else's kids. And I can also learn from them. So their motto was, no heads in the bed, no check. I couldn't agree with that. And different calls were basically about these kids are not able to do this or they're not able to do that. No, because if you're telling me that these kids are not able to do that, you're telling me my kid's not ever going to do it. So we're not going to do it. We can't do that. But the problem was it was becoming part of the statistics because they was going to jail. Jail was housing them like crazy. 16, 17 years old, going in and out of jail. And it was horrifying. And it was to the point where I was being called their mother. They called me their mother. I'm only 37 years old, but they called me their mother because I actually cared. I act like that. You know, I made them feel like they was somebody, and they you know, and they had a place because if I can only teach them how to raise their hands, that's what I need to teach them, no matter what they, you know, their situation was. But I did also learn too that because of like the African American community, we do lack in a lot of resources. We don't get a lot. I tried to come here. I came here from Mississippi. I was also, I came here from Mississippi to get my kids some help through the Marcus Institute and all that. If I knew I was going to have kids that had autism, I would put them on before I had them. But you can't, it's hard enough for you to tell me that there are years and years and years and years down the line to the point where my kids can never probably ever get on these lists. And it's horrible because if I go in, I'm not racist, but if I go in there, the majority is Caucasian. My kids right now, I took my kids out of the school system, out of the public school system because my kids was getting taught because they told me that my child, one of my kids was basically, he's not able to, they called it the shit throwing class. And they said that they can't be in the normal class because they can't, operate. So I'm asking them, where's the in-between class for my child to be able to go to if they can't go into this class and they don't fit in this class? So I took my kids out of the schools, and all I got was, we condone you. Don't condone me, because I did live in an all-black neighborhood also. Gentrification came in, they turned around, they built schools that had programs now, which there were no Caucasians, none of these people that was going into these schools at the time.
So let me ask you this, and I'm so sorry that you have had such a difficult time. And it sounds to us as if you are asking a question about resources for all types of families that are experiencing crisis. And I would toss that question to Councilmember Waits on, can you share with our audience some of the resources that are available as residents of the city of Atlanta?
Thank you so much. And one, thank you for sharing the challenges that you're having, because I'm pretty confident that those are some of the questions that our stakeholders have at home, including some of the things that my friend in the audience had to say tonight. So a couple of things I think are happening. One of those is in the audience, the executive director for PAD is here, and we're collaborating with them. In this particular budget, I can say that the administration put additional resources to improve the capacity for PAD, and that is policing alternative diversion. So, for example, we would point them to some of the things of transitional housing, or if there's a need for drug treatment services, we will point them in those directions. And so I think now that individuals are starting to have conversations, more resources are coming online. For the state of Georgia, the three-digit number to which you can call to make a phone call. I know here in Atlanta, recently we had multiple tragedies that were completely avoidable had the family known who to make a phone call to. Our police chief, our interim police chief, Chief Shearbaum, has indicated that he's moving in the direction to which that we have a direct line for individuals who are facing mental health challenges. And so these individuals are no longer detained and arrested, but we have specific experts and individuals who are trained to deal with those types of dynamics. Regarding the challenges that my colleague just indicated or referenced, the Atlanta public school system is moving in that direction in terms of collaborating with mental health experts and individuals who have those challenges. And then, of course, we know that there are a number of young people and youth that are living in transitional housing as they are approaching and going to school every day. And so I think part of that is connecting all of us to the conversation, and I think it involves having subject matter experts as well as the law enforcement officials at the table, as well as the stakeholders who are here in the office tonight. So we're going to provide a list of resources that will be available to individuals should they be having certain challenges. I'd like to talk further as well about, should you know someone who has attempted suicide or who is dealing with some levels of anxiety, and I'd like to go first and say it now, that I am someone who has battled depression. I am someone that didn't feel comfortable sharing that. And through conversations with my colleagues, I'm able to say those things. I went to Kaiser twice this year thinking that I was experiencing a heart attack, when in fact some of that was anxiety. And I think that as Americans, we are trained to go, go, go. We're trained to not rest. We're trained that behavior means that you're weak. That behavior means that somehow that you're not strong. And I think that's one of the reasons that you find so many people that are backed into a corner. So when you can make the statement and say that I suffer from depression, I'm dealing with anxiety, maybe we're more apt to get help in dealing with that. And so that's what I think this conversation really ultimately is about today, is for people to know, one, that there's someone on the other side that cares about this. Two, you're not the only one that's dealing with these types of conversations. And for someone like Dr. Brown, who has survived suicide, to talk about how you can thrive, that how you can continue to thrive in the middle of dealing with all the other stuff that you're dealing with. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I wanted to go to two things. One, I'm coming to you, Dr. Brown, but for our stakeholder who is in the audience, I would be remiss if I didn't make you aware of the number 211. And that's a number that you can dial that is managed by the United Way of Greater Atlanta, where anyone in our community who is experiencing any type of need, not necessarily the one of the subject for today, but any type of need, there is a referral and they will connect you to resources that can help you. So, briefly, please.
Okay, so like with the educational with the education system, like the education system, they're not, we don't have as many schools for these types of people.
Alternative schools,
To be
yes.
able to, that can be able to address, or the people that the teachers or that's teaching, they're not equipped to be able to teach. They don't understand them at all.
So you're talking about resources, yes,
Right.
yes.
But at the same time, I'm saying this from my point of view, from my kids. My kids have to get on a bus. They have to get off a bus. They have to get off a bus onto a train, from that train onto a bus, and then walk to school for be able to go to a school that's actually equipped for them to be able to learn and have programs that are suitable for them. So they have no transportation because it is a charter. They don't, and those are the type of kids those are the ones that actually need those type of resources. So why are the resources actually there? Why would kids that actually have to try to get help, that are actually out there needing the help, having to try to maintain and manage their way all the way to school? Because you cannot, you don't start when a tree is grown. You start when it's small, and you bend it and you make it up to where the way you want it made, or what they need it made to. But it's a problem because if you're not starting at their youth, it's going to be even harder to start when they get grown. They need their resources from ground zero. But at the same time, when they start their 504s, their IEPs, it takes a year when they start. It takes too long for them to be able to assess and be able to get their information in, for them to be able to start. It's too long.
Thank you very much. I think everyone in this room and in the audience is experiencing the pain and the frustration that you are experiencing, and those are the things that we have experts here to discuss this afternoon, and ways to, as our council member said, provide access to resources who can answer questions and perhaps move things along at a greater pace. But I wanted to ask you, Dr. Brown Rivers, as a survivor, how difficult was it, if at all, for you to ask for, accept, and receive the help that you needed? And how did you overcome the perceived stigma of being a person of color with a secret, perceived as weak, who attempted to take her own life?
It was very difficult when I was a teenager because I went through a stage of rebellion, okay? I did not want to accept any help because I didn't feel that I needed any help. I felt that I was okay, all right? And so when I sat with a few counselors, I would ask them, are you a survivor of sexual abuse? Their answer was no. I automatically checked them off my list. I could not have a conversation with them because they could not relate to me. Now that I'm older, I have a different respect for someone who has a heart for that ministry, because it's a very special and technical type of ministry. And that's an area that I actually want to work with the youth, with the kids. But at that time, when I was 13, when I attempted, I definitely did not talk to anybody about it because I was embarrassed. I never told my mother. To this day, I've never told my mother, okay? I just told just a couple of my close friends. So I was not open to really getting help for it because I felt that I did not know anybody who was my age who went through what I went through. It's not like a common conversation. You know, a lot of times I'll speak to people, they'll say, oh, it was my mom's friend, and this is later on as I became an adult, but it's very hard to meet someone that says it was my father. That's like a very alone type of ministry that you kind of just feel alone when you're walking it. And for me, I was looking for somebody that was like me that can say, I went through that, I survived that, so that's why as an adult, my mission is to become that for that little girl or that little boy, because I know how lonely it can be. So I was not open to that support. I am gonna just say something. I'm a woman of faith. My grandmother, I did not learn about faith or ministry or religion from my mother. She didn't grow up that way. She had a rough life herself. But I learned it from my grandmother. At one point, she had to take care of me. I had a near-death experience, and she was my caretaker. And I lost my voice for a few weeks in the attack that I went through at 6. And she spoke about the Bible. She spoke about some of the stories in the Bible, some of the scriptures in the Bible, and I was able to relate to those stories at a very early age, and they brought life into my broken spirit. My spirit was very broken. I went through bullying growing up. You know, I was called black girl, ugly girl, big lip, big nose, big forehead, you so ugly. And so I had self-esteem issues, and then I went through that type of abuse, and then the family was angry with me because I was speaking about it. So, you know, I experienced a lot of rejection, and for me, the only place that I could go to that was a consistent place of love and peace and healing for me was the area of spirituality. And in my case, you know, I meet people from all different walks of life. The first person that prophesied over me was a Buddhist. So I'm a Christian. I love people. I meet them where they are today. I don't judge people. And a lot of times we share stories related to spirituality because there is the God voice that you can hear and that I hear. And then there's the demonic attacks that you may also be able to hear. And I did hear in 2017 and 2018, I fought the spirit of suicide again. You know, I went through a really bad divorce. I lost everything. I left my ex-husband with everything. My credit was ruined. My finances had drastically changed. It's something that I'm still coming out of because it was a big effect on me becoming a single mother. I have 4 children. And so I moved from Boston, where I grew up, to Georgia alone, so I have no family here. So again, walking through a storm and being alone, being isolated, and you know, I lost my business, I lost everything, and I was fighting that spirit. It came to me and told me, girl, you better check out, and leave with, you know, I had a big name in Boston, and so I was respected and known there for other things, and then I lost everything, and I had to, you know, I'm seeing people going through it now in the pandemic, and I'm like, oh, I went through this already, so at least I'm equipped to kind of speak to them, you know, when they're coming and sharing some of their stories. But again, I don't want to take up all the time, but the area of spirituality for me is a place that I go to that I can, you know, really hear from God, and it heals my spirit. And even when I have nothing, I have everything with God in my spirit, in my heart, and my soul.
Councilmember Waits, you wanted to weigh in, and then I've got a question for Dr. Izzard.
Absolutely. I wanted to be respectful of everyone's time this evening. We were supposed to conclude at 5:30, and due to several traffic issues in terms of our panelists arriving, parking dynamics, as well as some technical issues up front, I'd like to run until about 5:45, 6 p.m. And so if anyone needs to depart, we fully understand, and we want to thank you for your patience with us. At some point in the conversation, I have been told, and I am a woman of faith, and that's what sustained me, but there is a segment of the population who has been abused by the faith community. And so I would love if you could lead us into a conversation for those ones that are sitting at home who have been abused and who have had their trust misused by the faith community. I would love to get something in there for those ones who are sitting at home.
Which is an excellent transition into a question that I had for Dr. Izzard based upon what Dr. Boston has said, Dr. Brown Rivers has said from Boston. You talked about being bullied. And then in the video that everyone will see, we are hearing young people also talk about feeling bullied because they're scrolling through social media and assessing that their life doesn't measure up to everyone else's best day. So with that, Dr. Izzard, I would love for you to weigh in on what Councilmember Waits has suggested and help us initiate this discussion.
Absolutely. First, I want to take the opportunity to thank the mother in the room for sharing her deepest heart, and her feelings as it relates to her own children with mental health challenges. And to be able to say that Georgia is in a state that we're growing. We're growing. That's why we're having this inaugural mental health town hall that we're having. And I know that it's not just Georgia, it's pretty much across our nation, because again, mental health has been something that has been shunned and not talked about enough. And I think COVID, it brought a light to mental health, which is something that I'm eternally grateful for, because I know that mental health is my gift to share with the world. But I just want to say to the parents in the room and others in the room who've been hurt by some of the lack of resources that we've had, that we're working on it. We're working on it. Georgia is 48th in the nation for access to mental health care. So we're at the very bottom. And that's something we're working toward, which we are grateful now that HB 1013, and again, that goes back to what Councilwoman Wade was saying, all of us have to come together as parents, as community residents, as clinical providers, as law enforcement. It takes a whole community to recover, a whole community to recover. So that is why we're starting to partner, we're starting to collaborate, we're starting to join together so that we can find out what this organization is doing, this department is doing, this county is doing. I was just on a meeting last week with the Council of State Governments Justice Center. We're looking at ways that we can improve the diversion, decreasing people with mental illness and substance use in the jails. We're having meetings and talks all over the place. So just know that we're working on it. We're working toward it. And in the meantime, connect with the current resources that we do have, like NAMI, like the American Foundation of Suicide. Some of these organizations can give you that warm holding, that support that you're looking for, and at least get you some help and some resources until we can get a little bit better. I also serve on the Georgia Department of Behavior Health and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council. And yes, their Developmental Disabilities Office said they have a long waiting list. But again, due to HB 1013, the funding, the money is there now. But it's still going to be a process. So please be patient with us. Moving forward, as we were speaking about faith, as we were speaking about moving a little bit forward in other areas related to mental health, I think that we all have to get to a place to where we understand trauma. This is another area that is not talked enough about as it relates to becoming trauma-informed communities. So that's an area that we're just starting to move the needle in. So when you talk about church hurt, we understand that in the African American community, we went to the church for healing. We went there for hope. So absolutely, if you were hurt in the church, that can cause you to have a mental health condition and a mental health challenge. And you're wondering, okay, well, how do I circle this or come back around, or how do I get there? So again, understanding what that trauma looks like, and trauma is different for everybody. Yeah, we have a clinical definition for trauma as it relates to a severe experience or event that somebody goes through that causes them to have mental health and emotional challenges, but trauma is complex. You all. It is very complex, and it takes time to work through. We got clinical terms out there, a person with unresolved trauma. What does that really look like? Because we're all experiencing trauma of some sort or some form in our current society today. COVID was trauma for all of us.
Yes.
We're all still experiencing secondary traumatic stress related to COVID, and we're still not out of COVID. So again, we're all experiencing these mental health related challenges. So I think trauma is something that is huge, that that we got to continue to work toward. We got to get back to our faith, those of us that have a faith base, and it's not to force beliefs off on anybody. Whatever your belief is, whatever you hold to, that's what you want to continue to hold to if it's helping you and it's working for you. But for those that do have a faith base, connect with those organizations. We're even doing that now with DBHDD. We're connecting with the faith communities so that they can understand, so that they know how to help. We have ministers, they have just been overwhelmed with individuals coming to them with challenges that they don't understand, they're not trained for even. So again, we're all coming together as a community. And one area I want to speak about, I think you all addressed the African American community and communities of color as it relates to trauma. Something else we don't always talk about, and that is racial trauma. That is something that all African Americans have experienced some level of. That is racial trauma, and racial trauma is the effects of mental and emotional from discrimination. So whether that's institutional racism, whether that's systemic racism, whether that's stereotyping, whether that's profiling, that is a huge area that we have to start looking at and understanding the signs and symptoms of, because we all have experienced it to some level as people of color. And when it comes to our African American men, and this is something I'm extremely passionate about. I've done 3 African American male symposiums, and our men are struggling at deeper and deeper depths because they have hid for so many years and for so long what their hurts really are, and have felt as though they couldn't come to anyone and share and talk about what their challenges were. You're talking about, we're seeing the suicide rates increase in children of color. The actual ages from 10 to 34, suicide is the second leading cause of death for our young Black girls and our young Black boys. It has absolutely tripled as it relates to them having suicidal ideation, as it relates to them having actual suicide attempts. Yes, even one of my own beautiful, close loved ones, beautiful Black man, got to the point where we had to get him to the psychiatric unit at the hospital for a suicide attempt. So you all, it's happening. And it is because we have got to continue to come together and have these conversations, have these talks, and then work toward the solutions together. So it's a start, it's a step forward, it's the beginning, and I hope that all of you are willing to come on board with all of us. And the advocacy piece, so important. One thing I love about NAMI, advocacy, advocacy, advocacy. Talking to your elected officials, helping them to understand. We're blessed that Councilwoman Wade, she understands, but not all elected officials understand. That is why I just recently ran for Georgia State House of Representatives. While I did not win the seat, I won in collaborating with more community partnerships and making sure that I yelled loud about mental health, mental health, mental health, because we realize that our budget in our House and our Senate, it has to grow larger so that we can meet the needs of our people. And I'm sorry I went on a little bit.
Dr. Dodson, if you would, and you keep this up for us, I'd like for you to talk to us about PTSD and the environment that will lead to PTSD, whether it is trauma, as Dr. Izzard just discussed, or systemic racism, or everyday racism, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday racism. What happens when you can't get away from it? The environment that causes stress and leads you into crisis and leads to that PTSD. Can you get away from it? And how can those people battling that win?
So that's a great question. Before I answer that, I actually want to piggyback, though, on something that was mentioned about racial trauma, because I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so important. I just wanted to add some information that a lot of people aren't aware of. When we go through chronic experiences of discrimination and racism or other types of isms, any kind of discrimination, we literally internalize that in our body. there is a lot of research that shows that chronic stress of various sorts, including race-based stress, leads to a wear and tear in the body. It changes how the brain operates. It can change the structure of the brain. My expertise is in aging, so how the brain changes as we age, and we know that Black and brown people who are older, who've experienced a lifetime of discrimination, have greater changes in their brain as they get older. They're more vulnerable to dementia, to Alzheimer's disease, to other conditions, because eventually the body starts to wear away. In particular, there's this big effect on the cardiovascular system. So when we think about having more, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, stroke, heart attack in the Black community, part of that is likely because of the effects of the body responding to that chronic discrimination. The last thing I'll say about that, because I could talk about this for hours, it's a big part of my interest trying to figure out how we can buffer ourselves. But the research shows that it's not just these huge life-changing, that people might think of, acts of discrimination that are like really blatant. They are the small things. The small ones add up. The term microaggressions, I kind of don't like it because it implies that it's not important. Micro sounds small. It's not small. So when you are every day, every week, constantly experiencing these little jabs, these little indirect things, again, you internalize it. You become more cautious and worried and vigilant, like looking for when it's going to happen. That's not good for your body. It's not good for your brain. So I just think it's really important to know that we have to do something about this, because some of the health disparities we see when it comes to even medical conditions as well as mental health conditions really can be tied to this internalization of chronic stress and discrimination. So,
Dr. Brown Rivers, and then we have a question from a stakeholder.
Dr. Brown Willis, yes. So now that we're on that topic, I also wanted to say some of the discrimination that I experienced was not only from white people, not only from Spanish people, but also from my own Black people. So I'm an Afro-Latina, and so I did not fit in the Black community enough sometimes when I was around them, and so they would segregate me and have their clique. I experienced that, in many different circles. Normally, I'm the new person coming in, so I'm like, okay, I already know how this is going to go, because I've gone through it so much since I was a little girl that I can normally pick it up when I enter into a group of new people. But I've gone through it with Caucasian people, white people, Black people. My grandchildren, they're half white, half Black. Okay, and so I'm being as plain and simple that we have to do better, even respecting each other as people, because all of us are experiencing, we're all going through something, and right now, coming out of this pandemic, we should be in a place of healing and respecting people. That's all I'm gonna say right now.
Please, you have a question?
I do. Linda Perrin. I'm a first grade teacher, so I know all about these
God bless you.
Illnesses and, the spectrum, as she pointed out. And I, for one, want to make sure that if there is a first step that we can inform our parents of, they get it. Now, she spoke about, Dr. Otolaro, she spoke about the 988 number. Now, I heard that on the news, but since that time, that's been about 2 weeks ago, and everyone who I've talked with since that point and asked them if they heard it, they don't know anything about it. So since Councilmember Waits, you talked about extra money in the budget for mental illness, I wonder if your office has any plans for trying to promote that. I know that we have the United Way 211 number, but that's a new resource, the 988 number. So do you have any plans to try to help promote that in the Atlanta area so that we can get more help? Because that's a national initiative, correct? Okay, and then the other thing I want to say, I'm also a member of CAP, Christian Association of Public Theologians. And just to let you know, we have a full curriculum of character education ready to go. So if there's anything we can do to partner with you in helping anybody in any way, we stand ready to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That is terrific. So I'm not going to put the mayor's staff on the spot, but I will say, thank you, Mr. Pace, for coming. I will say that this administration has put significant funding behind PAD and diversionary services, which includes a lot of the things that we're talking about. So that's one. Fulton County has stepped to the table and put $2.4 million into this conversation. House Bill 1013 now allows us to have some of the resources that we simply did not have at the local and county level to really expand to address some of the things that my colleague in the back that we're talking about. So the reality is that, and she indicated that COVID highlighted a lot of these challenges. So we're dealing with more people who are coming to the table saying, I'm having some challenges. Whereas before we sat in silos and we hid and we didn't talk about it. So to answer your point, I think that it's a matter of having people like you who are a part of the educational system to say, we don't know where to send our parents. And the 211 number, I think, is wonderful because they have a myriad of nonprofits that they can immediately look up, so you don't have to go to the website. You can call in and say, this is what I'm dealing with. Can you provide me with tools and resources? And they will give you a list of providers in your specific county. I have not tried the 988 number, but I would encourage everyone in the room today to just try it and see what happens so that we will be able to give information to our colleagues and to our friends, and we can talk about what challenges or what solutions may be out there. And so, again, I just want to applaud this mayor for stepping to the table again and putting a significant amount of money in the budget because I think we all understand, given the tragedies that we've seen here locally and in the news, that we're having some troubles and some challenges.
Yes.
Dr. Otolaro.
Thank you so much. And funding is a big part, so I'm so excited about the passing of the bill. The other thing is that there are some educational resources for schools that are completely free. So AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, does have free programming that we give to teachers. It's an hour and a half. We provide it, we facilitate it to how to identify some of the signs, how to start the conversation, and kind of where to go. We also have some for just community members, and we even have it in Spanish. So one of the challenges for accessing care sometimes is language. There's a language barrier, and that's something that we're trying to work in. The other challenge sometimes it's providers, and I kind of wanted to mention, because we talked about faith-based, finding a provider, so finding someone, a mental health specialist, I think it's like shopping for the best fruit at the grocery store. You pick one, you look at it, you go, and you decide, you know what? No, it's not ready. And you pick another one. So a lot of times what we find is that we'll help someone connect to a provider, and they don't match. Maybe the provider doesn't have the faith base that you would like them to have, that you want infused in that conversation. Maybe racially they don't match. Maybe you just don't like them. Like, let's just be honest. And then the person gives up, right? The person's like, well, I tried it, it didn't work, not trying this again. No, that's where we come in as on-the-field advocates and say, you know what, let's try to find you someone else, someone different. And you keep trying to find a provider until you find that right fit.
I want to say something, Ms. Presley, and again, I have never felt empowered to have these types of conversations, but several years ago when I was dealing with some mental health challenges, I decided that I was ready to sit on the couch and talk to someone. And what's interesting is that the first provider that I went to, I didn't identify with that person. The irony is that the person who did my intake screening actually dealt with children, preschoolers, toddlers, I think ages 3 to 5. And in our session, she spoke to me in a way where I felt safe. She spoke to me in a way where she wasn't pushy. And even though she scheduled me with another service provider, that person I just didn't identify with, and I literally shut down. So I asked, and her name is Susan, she's with Families First. I said, Susan, do you think that you could be my person where I could share whatever I was dealing with? And for a period of time, she did. And so for me, I had to utilize I guess it's a child psychologist or something for children, because that was the best person. And what I loved is she talked to me in a way where, today you don't have to say anything. You can just sit here. And it literally took me about 3 sessions to start to talk about some of the things that I was dealing with. And for me, that was a huge breakthrough. And then she gave me all of these different tools to talk about how I was feeling and what it really meant. And oftentimes, she asked me, well, what do you think about it? And I had never, ever been safe to have those types of conversations, that I was dealing with anxiety, that I was dealing with childhood stuff that I was ready to talk about literally in my 30s, and I'm 49 today. And so my hope for this conversation is that for those folks who are sitting at home, you know, if it's a church provider, whoever you feel comfortable talking to, someone safe, and it may change. I know for me, it was a child psychologist. Whoever that is, find somebody to have a conversation with and know you're not alone in the way that you're feeling. Thank you.
Dr. Izzard, would you agree that it is okay not to mesh or connect with the first provider that you meet, and that it's not a failure on the patient's part? It's just, it's like putting on a pair of shoes, and some sizes fit correctly and others do not. You have to, you put into it all that you are going to get out of it. Is that fair?
Absolutely. And our feelings do not get hurt, okay? As therapists, as licensed professionals, as clinicals, our feelings do not get hurt about that. But that's something we're working more toward on in our field as well. And the two terms are called cultural humility and cultural competence, okay? And so cultural humility has to deal with a individual being in a space to where they need to learn more about what's going on inside of them, okay? Really getting truthful and honest about what their biases may be, okay? And learning how to get to a space where they open themselves up to learn more and to understand that process as it relates to cultural humility, as it relates to cultural competence. That's learning more about that other culture, the clients that you're seeing, the individuals that you're talking to, learning more, taking the opportunity, whether you go to where they may have faith services or whether you go to some of their authentic food restaurants, whatever the case may be, it's stepping outside of the box, okay, and learning more about that culture. So those are two terms to make sure that you keep in mind when it comes to seeking or looking for a provider. Cultural humility and cultural competence is something you want to see in there. Now, when we look at clinical providers working together with other organizations such as schools, such as faith-based communities, that is critical. That is critical because then it goes back to us opening ourselves up and understanding the lived experiences of individuals in different spaces. That's very important for a clinical provider. So that's why collaboration has always been so huge with me, which is one of the reasons why I love the National Alliance of Mental Illness, because we believe in partnering. We believe in collaborating. And I love what Councilwoman Waits was speaking about as it relates to, well, what if you don't necessarily want to see a therapist? Or what if there's something else you may want to do? Absolutely. It is what works for you. There's a new project out called the Confess Project, okay, where they're training barbers, African-American barbers across the nation to be mental health advocates because they know that a Black man is going to the barber shop, okay? And he is going to talk about his challenges. He is going to talk about what is going on with him, with his fellas in that barber shop. So those individuals who have been trained, they can connect him to the right resources. And that barbershop is right here in our great city of Atlanta, Legends Barbershop, okay? So this process is beginning, okay? We're beginning the conversations. We're understanding that the collaboration is important, but we just want people to have support. We want people to understand that they no longer have to shy away and not hide behind, not hide behind whatever their challenges are as it relates to mental health that they are having. We want people to be able to be open, to be able to talk about it, because we know if they're not open, if they're not talking about it, then that's when we get to the helplessness and the hopelessness and more of the dark days. And we have to get to a place even within our close-knit families that we start to even speak about it anymore. I still have some family members, oh, such and such, they just doing that to get attention. I don't care how much attention they need. I'm going over there, okay? Because again, we don't want anyone getting to a place to where they are feeling alone dealing with their mental health challenges. We all need our mental health. Mental health touches everything. It touches our economy. It touches law enforcement. It touches our schools. It touches our elected officials. It touches our community. There's nothing that mental health does not touch. So if we don't get to a place to where we learn how to take care of our mental health, we're going to continue to have multiple challenges across the spectrum. There are coping tools that are out there that can help us to deal with the day in and day out stressors of life and to deal with our severe and persistent mental health challenges. We all need one another. So yes, Ms. Presley, it is okay for us to get to that place of where we understand that while that provider may not be the one for me, I may need to connect with another provider, or I may need to get to a support group, or I may need to go talk to my barber, as long as you are getting the support that you need.
I think we're hearing, everyone, that it is okay at times not to be okay. Dr. Dodson, is it fair to say that everyone at times experiences anxiety and perhaps some form of depression?
Absolutely. I think most people at some point in their life will know what it's like to have at least some of those symptoms of what we call depression, what we call anxiety. And it might not look the same. It might just be that you're going through a difficult time and you don't have any energy, or you're not very motivated. Or it could be something more disruptive to your life if you're having panic attacks, or maybe you're just afraid of speaking in public. There's so many variations of what depression and anxiety looks like. For many people, those symptoms might not rise to the level of having that functional impairment that we were hearing about, where you can't kind of go about in your life, but you're still experiencing something that's distressing to you, and that's still significant. So I think we can normalize mental health symptoms if we realize that many of us, if not all of us, will have some degree of those symptoms at some point in life. And the question is whether or not we can do something and intervene so it doesn't progress to the point of having those more significant consequences. But knowing that we're all affected can help people not feel alone, and to know that it's just part of life, but you can work through it. You can get help.
Wonderful. We do have a question from one of the stakeholders in the audience, but as that stakeholder comes forward, I wanted to let everyone know that also joining our panel this afternoon is Dr. Michelle Mitchell. She got her Ph.D. from Clark Atlanta University and is a licensed psychologist in the state of Georgia with 17 years of experience helping clients reach their growth potential. So talk about arriving right on time. You are right where we are having this conversation. But first, I'm going to ask this gentleman to step forward so that our panel can see. If you ask your question, please.
That's just a brief.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Moderator, and to the panel for this little brief moment, and especially to Councilmember Waits. I am a retired social worker. I've been a clinician, a case manager. I've worked in Fulton County, city, county, and state government as a case manager and clinician for a long time. Right now, I run a nonprofit for the chronically mentally ill, substance abusers, homeless, dually diagnosed and disabled vets. The challenge that, and I've been doing this for a long, long time. I've been in mental health maybe about 35, 40 years. The challenge, I believe, Councilmember Waits, is housing. Housing. That's why we've got over 8,000 homeless. And I think, I always talk about NUMMI. I look at NUMMI. NUMMI talks about just an enormous number of the housing population, of the homeless, population in the country. But here we have over 8,000. I think that, we don't have public housing anymore. We don't have affordable housing anymore. And I wish that there's somebody here from the mayor's office would, maybe, go back and let's kind of discuss the housing, because I think with affordable housing, we can probably alleviate some of the homeless population that we have. Gentrification has come in. I'm 74. I've been in this city for a long, long time. I was just out. I'm also a part of the Gospel Music Workshop of America. This city has changed so much. It's changed so much. We used to have, Vine City is Vine City, but there's just so much gentrification. South Atlanta, College Park. So I'm thinking, and you're talking about other barriers. I'm a member, DBHDD, behavioral disabilities, and that's fine. But I think the resources that we need is housing. Well, I don't know if we still got AWDA, Atlanta Workforce, anymore. I used to work with Atlanta, but the housing is a problem. Now, with my guys, I send them to not just community mental health, but it's a outpatient community mental health where they get the counseling, they get case management, they get one-on-one, they get the psychiatrist so that they can get medication and become medication stabilized. I just wanted to say that I think that part of the problem, we got no more public housing, no more university homes, no more Gilbert Garden, none of that anymore. Housing is a critical need for our homeless population. And I'd like to talk to Dr. Ezra before she leaves out today. Thank you.
We can make that happen.
Thank you very much.
And housing is a priority for this administration, if I've read things correctly. Councilwoman Waits.
Absolutely. Mr. Pace is in the audience,
Okay.
and he has made significant strides with respect to some of the challenges that we're having over in Forest Cove. And I would say that, and I'm not being critical of the previous administrations, but I will say, I can't figure out what that's about. So nonetheless, again, I don't want to speak for members of the council, but what I will tell you is when you look at the budget, when they say people first budget, you can see that bleed through every single area of government in terms of housing, in terms of resources for mental health, the diversionary center, and so I'm very proud to work alongside of a mayor that understands the issues that we're facing today.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mitchell, welcome again. As we are having this conversation we've talked about trust, we've talked about finding the right clinician to help, and it being okay if the first clinician is not the right clinician. I wanted to ask you about the normalization of mental illness. How close are we? Have we hit that tipping point where I'm not going to go to work today, I'm going to take a mental health day because I need to focus on me, and where those types of attitudes are more acceptable across the board in our communities? And then I have a follow-up about cost and accessibility to care.
So I would say that we are.
You should probably punch a button on your microphone.
Okay, yes, all right. I would say that things have improved. One of the things that I've noticed in different areas, so when it comes to just the conversations. So if we think about the conversations that we see on social media, when you think about the conversations that you see in general media, even on radio programs, I see people normalizing mental health. There are more people who are willing to say, I experience anxiety, I've experienced depression. There was a time when I was suicidal, right? And so I think what happens is that the more we have conversations, the more people understand that mental health is a part of your health, right? It's just as important as physical health, and there's no shame in admitting it. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people who still experience stigma and shame, because one of the populations that still have a very difficult time sometimes are men, because we socialize men to see even just the expression of emotion, right? It's sometimes difficult. We don't socialize men to express emotion. So I do think that we do have to do a better job at normalizing it for men and allowing men to have that space, a safe space where they can talk and express what they're experiencing. The other area where I'm starting to see a change is within organizations. I think the more and more corporations and other just places where people work are saying, hey, you know what, we have a wellness program. You know what, we offer mental health services. You know what, we know all the signs of burnout, and we understand what contributes to burnout. And so what we're going to do is offer people in our organization more flexibility. We're going to offer them more time off. We are going to have health days, and the health days that include mental health. We are going to have our management participate in training where they understand the signs of a mental health crisis, and they're prepared to provide resources to employees that are experiencing mental health crises. So I see it twofold, is that within our communities, everybody has a sphere of influence, and I think we all have a responsibility to talk about mental health, but also people spend the most time at work. Really, we do. We spend the most time at work, and our children spend most of their time at school. And so if we talk about everyone in their utilizing their sphere of influence, and then also schools, and then also organizations where people work talking about mental health, I think we can do a little bit more to push that needle.
Should ability to pay be a barrier to access to care? And what about those people for whom ability to pay is the reason why they do not seek help?
I think ability to pay should not be a barrier, and that is one of the reasons why in most places, I would say, there are services that could be offered either in the community or also services that can be offered on a sliding scale fee. So what sliding scale basically means is that you're paying based upon what you can afford. So I do think that, yes, everyone should be able to have access to mental health services, and no, money should not be a barrier.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Mitchell. We appreciate everyone being with your grace for this time. We have run a little over because we started a little bit late, but what we would like to do now is ask each member of our panel to share a few final thoughts, and then we also want to make sure that we point you in the direction of resources and where help may be available, and we'll start here on the far end.
Thank you all for coming today. I'm just grateful to be a part of this panel and such an important conversation. When I told my mom about my abuse, I only told her 3 words. I said, él me tocó, okay? And in Spanish, that means he touched me. And we have to make it a safe place where people can tell you just a little bit, and they don't have to go into the details of the type of abuse that they went through, where we still can give them support. So again, I just want to leave you all with, try to find out what our resources are in the community so that when someone comes to you with an outcry for help, we know where to direct them. Thankfully, right now, we have the national 988 number that just rolled out. They have trained specialists. They're trained to deal with crisis so that we're not calling 911 the first time when someone's having a mental health crisis. So again, let's just keep getting educated and let's keep having these conversations. They're very well needed in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Otolaro.
I'm so touched by the ability to have this conversation and by every single one of you that's here. I encourage you guys not to stop here, though. So keep having the conversation. Ask other people, hey, how are you doing today? How's your mind today? How are you feeling today? And that's the thing, a lot of times we have these panels, we have these symposiums, and then the conversation stops, and I don't want that to happen. I want you guys to go home or get on your phone and look up at least one resource. And I encourage you guys to try the afsp.org website. They have tons of materials, even have guides as to how to have the conversation with someone, how to have a caring conversation. So just look up one resource and continue the conversation on your mental health and others' mental health.
Dr. Dodson.
Well, first, just thank you again for inviting me to be a part of this really, really important conversation. I want to leave you with two quick thoughts. One is that we've talked a lot about what to do when someone's experiencing crisis, experiencing mental health concerns. There's also this idea of prevention, of trying to do things before things happen, of trying to live in a way that can allow us to be less likely to develop problems, even though we can't necessarily stop it completely. So a lot of that's just being engaged in life, connecting with people, staying physically active, keeping your mind going, just living is really what it comes down to, rather than shutting down, even when it's difficult. So that would be number one. And then number two, just know that feel empowered, that you have the ability to do something when issues arise. Don't feel helpless. Don't feel like there's no one there who cares. Don't feel like you don't have resources. Hopefully you've learned some things today to let you share with others, to be able to know that you can be empowered, to be able to promote your mental health the same way that you would your physical health.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dodson. Dr. Mitchell.
I'm encouraged, and I want to thank everyone for coming out today, because I do think every time we have the conversation, it's helpful. And so, again, like some of the other panelists, I just want to encourage you all to continue the conversation at home, continue the conversation at work, continue the conversation where your kids attend school. And know that, yes, we have 998. Also remember, for individuals who have a lower income, we have community service boards. And also, don't forget the universities. Many of our local universities have university counseling centers that are open to the public. And they provide services on a sliding scale fee, even assessment. Sometimes it's very hard to get evaluations, because sometimes people know, you know what, I know that something's going on with me. I know that something's going on with my child. I just don't know what it is, and maybe I can't afford it. And especially for kids, sometimes the insurance companies won't even pay if they believe that the evaluation could be completed at school. And sometimes it can take an entire year for the school to get to an evaluation. So don't forget about your local universities. They have counseling centers, and they can provide the evaluation. So also, if you work for your employer, I would say visit HR and ask about the wellness programs, because remember, mental health is a part of your physical health. Mental health is health, so don't forget that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Izzard?
Again, I want to thank Councilwoman Waits and her team for inviting me out today. Again, mental health is not just my passion, but it literally is my gift to share with the world, you all. Again, mental health touches everything. And so this is something that we have to continue to come together and talk about. But now let's have the call for action. Let's get into action mode. My clinical providers up here understand that we have something called stages of change, where we start with pre-contemplation, contemplation, but then we get to action, and then we get to maintenance. But I want us to get to a place of action, and it starts with the conversations that we're having here today. This is community recovery. We are taking our communities back by doing what we are doing today, so we can applaud all of ourselves today for coming here and speaking out and speaking loud about mental health. As it relates to resources, you've heard several up here, but again, I would be remiss if I did not mention the National Alliance of Mental Illness right here in Georgia, NAMIGA.org. You can contact us. Please feel free. You can come to several of our trainings that we have. We have programming. All of it is free, 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 free. Come and get the support that you need. There are also other great organizations out there. We were talking about cultural humility and cultural competence. Another great one, Silence the Shame, where Shanti Das is the founder, Jill Gooding is the CEO. They're doing great work in mental health awareness for young people of color as well as adults of color. We actually had a wonderful fireside chat with Ms. Keisha Knight-Pulliam on the Clark Atlanta campus last October, which did really well, bringing mental awareness to that young adult population. So again, you all, collaboration is the key. Coming together is the key so that we can continue to speak about the challenges that we're having, but also about the solutions that we can create to get to action. Also, don't let me forget our great RCOs, which is our recovery community organizations that are out there that provide a lot of support. I serve on the board for Walton Empowers, that is in Walton County, but serves Walton County and Newton County. But we have RCOs all over the nation. The leading area for that organization, for that is the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse. They have a lot of free programming as well. So again, just get in contact. Get in contact with some of us. Go on some of these websites so that you can identify what resources are in your area. And lastly, the Stepping Up Initiative. That is an initiative that decreases the number of individuals with mental illness and substance use in the jails, and we are working toward identifying diversion-type programming that can prevent people from going to the jail, and also that's helping people in between that being released from jail. So we're so grateful that Fulton County now has their diversion center that they're working toward opening up. That's going to be a blessing for the city of Atlanta, for Fulton County as a whole. I recently learned that Fulton County does not have a community service board, but they do have their own Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, as well as other mental health services available across the city. So again, get connected, get in the know, and let's recover our communities together.
Thank you very much, Dr. Izzard. I do know that we have a representative from the city, from the mayor's office, who wanted to come. You come to the podium, please, sir, and reinforce the commitment.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Just a big thank you to the panelists today. Ms. Presley, this was very informative symposium. My name is Theo Pace. I serve as Deputy Chief of Staff for Mayor Andre Dickens. So I would just like to bring greetings from the administration. As Councilmember Waits mentioned earlier, this administration has invested a significant amount of funding into mental health, our pre-arrest diversion services, whether it's Partners for Home, dealing with homelessness, as the gentleman mentioned, as well as affordable housing. But I think this is very informative, especially to communities of color. And just want to thank you all for really providing a very informative and good symposium, as well as thank you to the moderator as well. And I would like to also provide a big thank you to Councilmember Waits for really hosting this symposium on behalf of the city. It's a very important topic, and just want to thank you all for coming.
And again, we do want to say thank you to everyone for participating. We want to say thank you to our panel for joining us this afternoon. We want to thank you to the people here in the chamber, as well as say thank you to those who are watching online. While it would be, in an ideal world, we would snap our fingers and this would not be an issue for anyone in our community. We know that that is not the case. What we do know is that we have started to have a conversation, and that especially in communities of color, we need to talk to the people in our families, in our circles of influence, at our work, at our children's schools, and we need to make it okay to have these conversations, because your mental health is your physical health, and there is no difference between the two, and we have to move. If we heard anything from this panel this afternoon, we've heard that especially in communities of color, we need to move beyond the stigma of, well, if I say something, then I'm weak. No, if you say something, you need help. And it is okay to ask for help. And we want to say thank you again to Atlanta City Council member Keisha Waits, who will close us out as we say good evening to everyone, as we are respectful, want to be very respectful of your time. Here, just stand right here.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Wanted to give a quick thank you to our moderator. She came on literally at the 11th hour, so please join me in giving the moderator a hand. And to the panel tonight, you guys have been exceptional, and it's my prayer and hope tonight that someone at home will benefit from the information that was shared. And then finally, that this will be the first of many conversations to happen. And so I thank each of you for coming out. I thank you for your patience with the timetable this evening. Yes, ma'am. Yes, it's live. We're live. Yes. So, so again, thank everyone for your patience. And again, to our moderator, we are so grateful for your presence this evening. And we hope that the information tonight benefits some families at home. Thank you again.
And even teens is social media. I am in my friends and I call it the with and without generation. We grew up without social media and we're growing up with social media. Any media, people portraying lives in ways that they don't have the means, or people thinking they have to live up to certain expectations. Yes. I know people who feel like they have to look like $1 million every day they step out of the house, and they don't work, or they work a minimum wage job. And just trying to keep up with the stigma of showing I'm living my best life on social media is driving people crazy.
I think if you just let it all out, I think it'll be better results. Even if just going to see a therapist once a week, just getting it out because they're not a biased perspective compared to telling somebody you do know. So I would just say, trying out therapy, even if you have to write your feelings down, just to get it out your system.
I feel like the rising suicides for my generation is because we probably just don't feel heard a lot of times, or don't feel like we have someone to talk to that could relate to us. Just because we grew up in a time where the world really changed, we had to deal with a lot of change in the world, like the pandemic, COVID, canceling of graduations. We probably just had to deal with a lot of stuff on our own that our parents weren't so easily to understand.
Situation.
Why?
Because a lot of people look down on other people who are going through mental health issues because they simply don't believe it's a serious problem.
It's a good question. I honestly don't know. I wouldn't know what to do.
I don't know who to refer a person who is going to commit suicide to.
If someone called me and said they were going to commit suicide, I probably wouldn't know what to do, because you never know what they're going to do in that moment.
If a friend called me and they were wanting to commit suicide, I now know that there are resources that are available to them. Growing up in the Black community, the first response is, always to tell someone, you don't mean that, or we're just going to pray. Prayer is not always the only answer.
I was about 5 years old when I went through child sexual abuse, and I had to keep this secret because I was told by my abuser not to tell this secret. It continued and continued, and when I go to my dad's house and then she said yes, I said, "Él me tocó." Those were the 3 words that I said to her in Spanish, and in English they mean, "He touched me." And those were the only 3 words that I got out because my mom, she got rightfully upset. She got very irate, and she started to make phone calls and call the whole family. I felt like I let my whole family down because back in those days, it was a big deal. You do not tell your family's secrets. You do not tell other people what happens in this house, stays in this house. We live by that because that's the way we were programmed. That's the way we were brought up. Back then, I did not realize that keeping such a secret inside would be detrimental and really cause me to battle with so much depression and feel isolated and feel alone. Around age 13, I attempted suicide. I was hoping to end the pain and to get away from everybody that's hurt me, especially that experience with sexual abuse. You know, a lot of times people think that because you went through it so many years ago that you're over it today, but these are things that keep coming up in your life if they're not appropriately addressed. My name is Dr. Nancy V. Brown Willis.